You're listening to Sips of Sanity, your toolkit for emotional and intuitive intelligence, or what we like to call the dirty work. Let's do it.
Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
We are going to welcome everybody into the new year with a show on shame.
Yes, one of the roughest things you can talk about. Happy New Year, everyone.
That's true. I didn't think about that when I prepared this show.
But when you're in the business of healing, you're not usually talking about lighthearted fun stuff.
Right. And every single person feels shame. Mm-hmm. We are all shamed by society or by
parents, institutions, friends, ourselves.
Yes. And there's some confusion around shame and guilt. Mm-hmm. There is so much controversy over the internet, in particular, over whether shame and guilt are the exact same thing or they are two different things. So one of the first things that I did was dive into that, and I wrote down some of the key things that some people believe are the difference between shame and guilt. Both shame and guilt are emotions, and if someone is interested in the emotional wheel, which again is on the internet, people can go and check that out. And that might be very helpful because there will be other descriptor words there as well. So I'm going to read some of the definitions for shame because that's our focus today. So the first one is you may have done something dishonorable, immoral, or what you perceive to be wrong. And as a result of that, you feel shame. Now, I think it's really important to point out to people here that this is something that you have actually done. It's not something that other people are projecting a feeling on you or trying to create shame within you. This definition of shame, this very first one, has to do with the fact that you have done something that you feel shameful about.
Knowingly.
That's correct. Or perhaps, maybe, Kelly, maybe after the fact too. Maybe some people know it willingly or did it willingly, and maybe some people didn't but felt shame afterwards.
So I think I want to ask a question in like as an intention to kind of clarify something here. We can personally do something wrong or immoral or unethical and realize during, before, or even after that it is such. Mm-hmm. And shame is the resulted feeling. And I want to make this distinction because other people can make us feel it, or we can make our own selves feel it all by ourselves, or both can happen. But the point is that shame is a result of something that you have done.
Yes. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose maybe even tacking on upon reflection.
Yes.
Where we have evaluated right and wrong, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy.
Oh, I think you did such a good job of explaining that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, because some people won't evaluate their own actions.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons, right? We can have people on the spectrum, which just feel and think that everything is so calculated that they don't need to reflect because they calculated before. And I'm not judging that at all. Mm-hmm. And some people will reflect heavily. Some won't reflect at all because they've got narcissistic tendencies, mm-hmm. Or a lack of ability to even know how to reflect on something, to know that we had other options.
It's fantastic that you're saying that some people don't have the awareness or the skill set to reflect in order to come to a place of shame. The next point that I had read was how necessary feeling shame is for the growth of our species. Mm-hmm. And that if we do not feel shame and go into the process that you're talking about, we don't go into self-reflection about what our actions or our words have done, we're in a lot of trouble as a species.
Well, right, because then we're just heading right back into barbaric behavior.
You got it. We go backwards instead of forwards in progress. Mm-hmm. And that means, I think it means also lack of empathy when you don't bother doing the whole process that you talked about, mm-hmm. about the self-reflection and about using some tools in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one more aspect of shame is feeling unworthiness. And I think to some degree, Kelly, we feel unworthy because there's a sense of judgment or comparison to. Mm-hmm. And because of that comparison or feeling judgmental about ourselves or listening to someone else's judgment of us can allow us to sit in those feelings of shame.
Interesting, because I think you can feel unworthy for a number of reasons, and shame doesn't necessarily have to be a factor.
Right.
However, if shame is what's felt first, worthy can be another resulted emotion.
Very good. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I think about being, nominated for one of the business awards in the city years ago. And I could easily feel unworthy of being in that room with long established businesses and business people. But I didn't do anything to feel shame. I didn't do anything that was, unethical or makes me feel like a bad person.
Right.
You just feel unworthy of this kind of accolade. But then, like I mentioned, you can certainly do something that is not great, not healthy, however you want to define it, feel shame, and then as a result, feel unworthy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the explanation. Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, so we're going to move on to guilt now.
Sure.
Okay. In guilt can help you understand how your actions impact others. And that added to that was that you feel guilt as a response from the actions that you have taken. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things I saw over and over again under guilt was that it was supposed to be felt so that you actually took an action as a result of feeling guilt to move forward in some way that's positive.
To rectify.
Yes.
I don't know if I'm functioning from kind of out of date definitions, but it was always my understanding that guilt was something, I felt guilty when I did something I knew to be wrong.
Right.
Or unethical, or however we've been defining it so far. And that shame was when I actually internalized that I was a bad person.
I agree.
Can I just kind of use a lighthearted example? Like,
Sure.
I have dropped the ball writing down plans in my agenda, and I have forgotten a lunch date. I can feel very guilty for having wasted a friend's time, very guilty for making them feel not valuable, that I didn't remember this plan that we had together. But I don't internalize that necessarily to think or believe that I'm a bad person overall. I know that I've made a mistake. I know that it's impacted their life, at least today. But I'm not feeling I'm not feeling shame that I'm a bad person overall.
Okay, and I'm going to toss in there that I think some people can feel both.
Absolutely. I'm simply trying to make the distinction that some people actually confuse the two, that if you feel guilty about something, it's almost like you have to prove to the other person that you believe you're a bad person and you're trying to make it up to them. Mm-hmm. When shame really had no place there to begin with.
I like that.
Unless you intentionally forgot and left them fucking hanging.
Right.
In which case, please reflect
Yes.
and be better.
Yeah, do better. Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to also bring up that while I was doing this research, Kelly, I found 80 synonyms for shame.
Wow.
Guilt was one of them. So they use the word interchangeably, but I wanted to read some of the other words for people. Loss of face, chagrin, mortified, humiliated, stigma, scandal, guilt, confusion, irritation, infamy, self-reproach, self-disgust, dishonor, degrade.
I wouldn't agree with half of them.
Yeah, and I found that super interesting that as I started reading them, I thought, now I'm totally confused.
Well, it's interesting because shame is also a verb, right? And if I listen to half of this list, degrade being the last one that you mentioned, I can see that it's a synonym if I was using shame as a verb, but certainly not if I was using shame as an emotion, like an experience.
Right. Oh, isn't that interesting? So, Kelly, deeply, shame is something that defines us. It's something that we truly believe about ourselves, that we are deeply a bad person, that there is something deep within us that is at fault.
Yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of, I consider to be fun things over the next couple days, but this is how we want people to think about shame in general. I also want to note, too, that guilt is going to come back up for sure because we can experience these things so closely together, as we've talked about, and that with both guilt and shame, there can be truth and untruth.
Right.
And that's important for people to understand because like you mentioned in kind of towards the beginning of the show, I can do something with the best of intentions, not anticipating how it's going to affect someone, and truly feel guilt and need to feel guilt about something of, whoa, shit, that did impact someone in a way that I never wanted to or meant to. And the sorry is true. The sorry is real. Someone can make me feel guilty for something I did that is not appropriate responsibility to put back on someone. And then guilt is not something that we should be feeling, but it's something that someone's putting on us.
Right.
And that's where I say there's truth and untruth. And that's the same about shame. I can feel shame about something that I believe to be true of myself. And perhaps I am worthy to feel that shame because it's going to help me, like you said, evolve. But, one of the biggest things that we're seeing for decades now is shame over our sexuality. Believing that there's something truly wrong with us if we identify one way or another with our sexual orientation. And that is, to me, absolutely preposterous that someone would feel shame about being a truly bad person simply because of who they love.
Right.
So, truth and untruth to both shame and guilt. And I hope people are excited or at the very least intrigued to continue having this conversation.
Me too. We have 4 more packed shows about it.
Okay, thank you for today. Thanks for listening to Sips of Sanity. Catch the full monthly series on patreon.com/by Sarlo.